I understand that we're in a highly regulated industry and I will follow those rules. But as far as how I grow my business, what my marketing ideas are, what I want to do with any of that, I am not somebody who was wired to ask for permission to do anything.
Hi, my name is Nick Berry. This is another episode of Connected Conversations in Insurance. I have my good friend David Carothers from sunny Florida. David, go ahead and give yourself a quick intro. We'll just jump into it.
What's up, Nick? Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation as always and look forward to sharing with your audience. For those of you who have not heard me speak or followed me online, own an agency that's predominantly middle market commercial in Tampa, Florida area. And I also support producers and agencies who are looking to get better at middle market commercial insurance sales nationwide through Killing Commercial Insurance and the Power Producer Base Camp, which are my online communities. And those are supported by the Power Producers podcast, which would probably be where most people would have heard from me or heard of me before. But I have my hands in a lot, but I tell people the most important things. And usually anytime you go on to something like this or a speaking engagement, they give all of the accolades or the things that you have your hands in professionally. And I'm quick to remind the audience that my number one role in life is to be the best husband I can be and the best daddy. And those are the things that are always the most important, no matter what. I very much live everything that you hear me say. I think it's probably surprising to people when I go places because I was in Louisville, Kentucky yesterday and I ran into a couple of people that, knew me from online, but we'd never met in person. Like, my God, you're the same guy that you are on Facebook. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not smart enough to be two people, number one. And number two, I don't have a great family life for social purposes. I have a great family life because that's where I invest my time, my energy, and all of that. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear about that because we can talk about all the professional stuff we want, but everything that's the most important to me is what happens inside the four walls of my house.
Yeah, that's one big thing for me too. I have a little girl with some special needs and providing for her and my family that's the goal, right?
Well, it's tough, man. I was late getting here this morning. I sit on the board for a nonprofit called Quest Inc., whose mission is to give people with developmental disabilities the opportunity to live a fruitful life that they might not otherwise live. And it's a mission that's extremely important to me because of what we deal with Ethan every single day. I have 4 kids and, Ethan will be a lifer with us. He's never going to be able to be self-sustained. It's just, that's the fact, right? And when we're dealt that hand, we have 2 options. We can either feel sorry for ourselves or we can lean into it. We chose to lean into it. And as you go through that journey, you learn a lot about yourself and who you are and what you really find important and value in life. When you have another human being that relies so heavily on you, you take that role very seriously. Not that I wouldn't take that role just as seriously with all of my children. It's different. And if you've not been down that road before, then it's tough to understand, but it's different.
Yeah. Izzy is, she's got her developmental challenges. And then my oldest daughter actually works for a company that provides services to adults who don't have family or their family doesn't have the resources or capabilities to take care of them. She runs a group home for individuals that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. She's 22 years old and running this house. Most people will never, ever realize what goes on in our communities.
100%.
Yep. Anyways, let's go back to insurance. You have had a pretty good, you're not a lifelong insurance agent. You've had a similar path where I've had a lot of careers, and now I'm in the tech side of insurance. How did you get into insurance?
It's one of those things everybody else says it, you fall into it. I wasn't looking for it, but I really kind of was. Not necessarily insurance per se. So my background is I was in retail. And if you've ever worked retail, then you understand how grueling it is. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for anybody having to work in retail or restaurants before they go into the real world, because that's where you learn how to deal with people at their absolute worst and how you learn to diffuse customer service situations and everything like that. But the problem is you're working, in my case, 100 hours a week and not getting weekends off, not getting holidays off, or sparingly. As Grayson got closer and closer to 2 years old, I just decided this is not how I'm going to run my household. So my father, who's essentially a career risk manager. And I said, what do I want to do? I need to do something where the harder I work, the more hours I work, I actually make more than me being on a salary and having a diminishing hourly rate the more hours I work. And he said, I'll tell you, he goes, I've always thought you would be a great producer. He said, I've bought insurance from some clowns over the years, and I feel like that you're a lot more intelligent, that you would work harder. If you would willing to come in and learn an industry, I think you could be very successful doing that. And I don't mind making some introductions to you. And so I said, all right, we'll see what that looks like. I started looking for my own introductions or my own path in, but he hooked me up with a guy that was sitting out his non-compete after selling a very successful agency and was waiting to hopefully launch another agency. And he said, this guy will have lunch with you. So I was in Birmingham, Alabama is where I lived at the time. And I jumped on a plane and I flew down and I had lunch at the original Outback Steakhouse on Henderson Avenue here in Tampa with Lowry Baldwin, who is the Baldwin behind the Baldwin Group, which is a massive firm at this point. Lowry and I talked and he said, David, I want to tell you two things. Number one, he said, the insurance industry is an average industry. He said, what I mean by that is it's full of average people. You have a lot of C players in the insurance industry. They do what they need to do to get by and nothing more. And he said, the problem is the industry rewards that. You can make a really good living and just be average. And he said, not that they're bad people. It's just if you're an A player and you want to come in and maximize your potential, it is going to be a really good opportunity for you as an A player to come in. And he said, and I believe that you have the ability to be an A player, which is why we're talking. And I'm like, all right, so here we go. You're winning me over. And he said, the next thing I'm going to tell you is I've got a non-compete. I can't do anything right now. He said, but what I want to build is an agency or a brokerage or whatever they are now. They're one of everything at this point. But he said, I want to give you the opportunity to maximize your earning potential. And he said, think of it like this. Everybody who buys insurance has really about $100 to spend. And think about that as five $20 bills. The firm that I'm going to build is going to give you the ability to get all five of those 20s. And the 5 20s were commercial insurance, personal insurance, group benefits, retirement, and life. And he said, when you go in and work on an account in my firm, then you're going to have the ability to get as many of those 20s as you possibly can. But you're never going to be able to come to me and say, I really wish I had an opportunity to earn here or here, because that's the platform I'm envisioning, I'm dreaming about, and I want to build. I went back to Birmingham, and this is one off. I flew down, had lunch, flew back, immediately went to work that afternoon or that evening because I was on night shift. We were auditing logistics processes at one of the super targets at the time, and turned in my notice. And that was it. 2 weeks later, I was down loading up my F-150 and moved down to Tampa, lived in one of my parents' spare bedrooms for a little while, started working towards getting my insurance license by day. Down here, it's much more difficult than a lot of other states. You have to actually go through 200 hours of education before you can ever sit. And back then it wasn't online. It was Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And I went to school Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. In the evenings, I went to work with my brother-in-law's dad, who had a pool building company. And I plumbed, tiled, and formed swimming pools. And sometimes I was doing that by headlights with my pickup truck. And what I did, this is before the real estate bust back that happened in 07 or 08. We're talking 04 at this point. I made friends with all the subcontractors that were at the new construction sites where I was doing this work on the pools. I got my insurance license, and the first thing I did was go back to the different job sites and solicit all the subs for their insurance and end up writing a good bit of it. And I was off to the races at that point. It's one of those things where, I kind of fell into it. I saw the opportunity. I think that the opportunity is limitless. It's 100% based on your own effort that you're willing to put into being successful in this industry. But I was there. We were just a startup when I finally started working with Baldwin. There were like 6 or 8 of us in a cubicle farm was it. And, now it's grown into this massive, I think it's like $2 billion in value, or valued at $2 billion on NASDAQ or whatever, maybe even more at this point. The problem is, when you start getting involved in organizations, and this is not a knock, I want to be very clear about that. They have a reason. They have reasons for people like me. I'm too entrepreneurial to be part of the system, man. I can't be part of a corporate firm. I understand that we're in a highly regulated industry and I will follow those rules. But as far as how I grow my business, what my marketing ideas are, what I want to do with any of that, I am not somebody who was wired to ask for permission to do anything. Because of that, that's ultimately what led me to have Florida Risk. And Florida Risk turns 10 next year. So we're in our 9th year officially as of July 1st.
Now, you're an interesting case because you had the 520 you could sell or you could earn at Baldwin, but now you guys are a commercial middle market agency, and that's all you guys do, right? You're only commercial.
So if you look at, so Nick, what does Florida Risk Partners do?
Yeah.
So we do heavy middle market that is slowly but surely. Our mix is moving a little bit downstream with the amount of consolidation with venture capital now buying service contractors and everything else. I lost 3 large accounts that cost us about $250,000 in revenue just because they were bought and put into a roll-up program by a VC firm that was buying contractors. And I didn't like the way that felt. And so I realized when you're top heavy, that's probably not the best move. And all I had ever done really is middle market. So we started moving down to the lower end of middle market and some of the more, I don't want to say transactional, but it's certainly a lot more velocity in terms of the interactions that you have than when you're going after something that's paying a couple $100,000 in premium with a much longer sales cycle. But the other thing you have to realize is even when you're just writing the middle market, having the 520s was nice. And that's the way you sell that if you're Lowry Baldwin, right? You're going to sell that to me as the producer because you want to show me what my income opportunities are. But as the agency principal, Lowry's protecting his revenue stream in his business because we can keep it all in one place. So we don't have another multi-lines brokerage that does benefits that also does P&C come in, take the benefits on an account, and then come and try and go after the property and casualty relationship we have. So we would go in and we were really good at it. We would go in, we would lead with whatever it was. It might be comp, it might be benefits. I did both. And whatever we got, we would immediately start putting the systems in place to bring all of the other things in under that umbrella. I didn't want to do that when I launched my agency because I didn't know enough about the technology that I needed to have for benefits. And quite honestly, with all of the stuff that was going on at that time, with Obamacare and everything else, and a lot of the regulations that were being passed down, I didn't want to have to keep up with all that stuff. I don't have to keep up with nearly as much on the P&C side as what I would if I was doing benefits or retirement. So immediately I said, okay, it's not even as much about the revenue. I would like to have the revenue stream, but it's more about who can I partner with as a benefits only brokerage that serves the same community I do, that I can refer that business to or have a joint venture with that will help keep my accounts protected, but I could also make some incremental revenue. And that's what we did. So any of the stuff that I don't do directly, we have formal relationships where we share financially and, formally with referrals with the people who do that stuff. The only thing that we do internally outside of the actual commercial is we do have a personal lines division. We are a Canopy Connect client. And so that's part of our process that we built into our intake with HubSpot. And that's the area where I see the most growth potential for us because the market here in Florida is softening to the point where we're getting capacity again. And so I'm excited to see where we're at, in 18 to 24 months on the personal line side, because there's just so much opportunity there for us to roll all of our contacts from our commercial clients in. And one of the things that I've always done, and I did it when I didn't really have personal lines here at FRP, is I would offer my clients the opportunity for me just to go out and do lunch and learns with their employees to explain the importance of having the right limits on personal auto and how your homeowner's policy really works and all of that stuff. And that's just a great way to take a commercial audience and convert it into a bunch of personal lines clients. I've got my average clients probably got well over 100 employees. Well, those are well over 100 prospects for me on the personal line side now. And I'll never forget when I decided I was going to do it, I very, very rarely play golf. I have a couple of memberships to golf clubs and I have to go and introduce myself. They have no clue who I am when I walk in because I maybe play once, twice a year. If I'm lucky, I'm just too busy. But I went in with a couple of my producers, like 3 of my producers, to play golf one afternoon. And we went into the restaurant before we had it was either before or after. And I looked, I said, guys, I want to show you something. I said, we used to walk in here and we would have 2 or 3 prospects. Now we walk in here and everybody is our prospect. Have at it. And it feels good because now I'm not relegated to just that one thing. It's a whole different animal. And you see the other side of this. It's completely different than middle market. But if you run a high performing personal lines agency, which I am not claiming to be, I'm just saying the people who do, they have technology at their fingertips that we wouldn't even have dreamt about 10 years ago. And it makes it a whole lot easier, I would argue, to write that business, to get it in the door as a prospect and streamline your processes to write it than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. And with AI being where it is now, who knows what it's going to look like 2 years from now.
Oh, when I was at FAIA, I got to see some really cool things coming down the pipeline for agencies. They can have inbound dialers that are inbound systems that can intake information that you maybe can't, either they're not comfortable with using Canopy Connect, or they don't like forms, or they won't talk to your salespeople, but they can call in, and those systems can consume that information and put it in your CRM, put it in your Radar, put it in your AMS. There's really cool too. Fetch is a cool tool. I think a lot of people kind of slept on, where Trace has got some really cool things coming in. So where your team could just in Slack or Teams say, hey, this is the risk, and it goes and looks and finds the appropriate 2 or 3 carriers for you in commercial.
It's basically like Ask Kodiak for personal lines, right? For the most part. And
yep.
I think one of my frustrations with InsurTech in general is there's so many really good ideas. I mean, anybody who has an idea or a dream and acts on it will always have my respect, whether it ends up going anywhere or not. The fact they were willing to invest in themselves and take that leap, they will always have my respect. But I feel like it's just there's so many things that are fragmented, right? I feel like we have a piece here, a piece here, a piece here. And if you bolt everything together, it works really, really well. But there's not like one seam. Like I just want one dashboard that I can go to that does everything I need. And I think, to some degree with Fetch, that's one of the things I always looked at, because I'm friends with David Watson over at Risk Advisor too. And I'm like, well, okay, so you have Trace's product that can identify the market. You have Watson's product that can go get all the underwriting information. And then now what are we going to do? Where are we going to take that information and push it into a Radar or whatever? And, a really cool one that has completely morphed since the first time I interviewed them on Power Producers is Refocus, Colby Tunick's company. And now, it seems to me, and Colby and I haven't gone into the granular yet because he's in the middle of a big project, very similar to what Gaia's doing as well, where you're basically taking all that data, pushing it in, and it's going out and using, I don't know if it's RPA or what, but you're pushing it into the various carriers' quoting sites. And literally, you could go from intake form all the way through to bindable quotes. I could go to a completely different level and talk about how I could take that, push that into Synthesia, create an AI video with the preformed script and do a video proposal. But when you look at that trail and how cool it sounds and how seamless it can be, it's still a lot of work to get all of that stuff bolted together and make it work. Yep. Now, the ADHD side of me, which is my entire brain is ADHD. Obviously, you guys have been hearing me talk for long enough now. I don't think the average agent looks at that and says, oh, well, if you do this and you do this and you do this and you put these things together. And I'm not saying that because I'm better than everybody else. I'm just saying the way my brain's wired. There's a lot of times I'm on the podcast and somebody's telling me about their product. And I'm like, well, you should think about doing this, 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 and this. And 6 months later, I basically outlined the roadmap that they had already created. They were developing it, but kind of predicted what it looks like. And I think we have things like accelerators that are out there now, like InsurTech New York's got a really good one. I know what Aubie Knight's doing with 101 Weston Labs up in North Carolina, and it's creating an environment where a lot of these pieces and parts are actually commingling and they're coming to these realizations on their own. So I think the industry is recognizing that there's opportunity to be a lot more efficient in how we implement InsurTech into our agencies. But we also know how quickly the insurance industry moves. And even though I would argue it's moving at the speed of light compared to what it was when I first got in, we're still so far behind everybody else. We got to get our heads up above ground and see what all the other industries are doing and benchmark ourselves against that.
Yeah, I mean, I joined the industry in 2016 full-time when I was working at another company. And I remember what it was looking like. And I consider myself a technologist. I'm a marketer, like my job is marketing, but I consider myself a technologist. There's 17 things that need to be connected, but they don't always talk together well. They don't integrate well. One thing that I've always wished we had was like a Y Combinator pipeline, right? In fintech and regular technology, there's a pipeline of you can go through a small accelerator and then you go to Y Combinator. You get introductions to other VCs and all these VC groups.
Do you feel like that's what Broker Tech Ventures is trying to do?
I think Broker Tech Ventures, because we have two accelerators. We have two insurance-focused accelerators. We have GIA, the Global Insurance Accelerator, which is sponsored by some very large insurance companies. And then there's Broker Tech Ventures, B2B, which is more VC funded with John Jacobin and his group. But we don't have that. And I had a really interesting conversation with a Startup Weekend founder a while ago, and he was asking me why insurance doesn't have this pipeline. And I said it's one reason: we don't have the TAM, we don't have the total addressable market that fintech does. Even if you include all of the captive agencies like the Allstates, the State Farms, the Farmers, all those, and all the independents, our best estimate is we have maybe 100,000 businesses to sell to in technology. Y Combinator and VCs, that's not big enough TAM for them to invest in it. So it's difficult. That's my dream, is to have that pipeline for new ideas. And then as you come through an accelerator, you go, hey, let me introduce Colby. And I met Colby when he was in Des Moines at GIA several years ago. That was three companies ago for me when I met Colby. But yeah, like having those, there's so few interconnectivity of not just the products, but also the people. The whole reason I go to trade shows as a vendor, like, yes, getting demos is important for me, but for me, it's more about interacting with the other vendors and building those relationships as a vendor than necessarily. That should be one of the most important things I could tell people, any vendors watching this podcast. Build a relationship with other vendors, because that's our power. Like, just like insurance is a relationship business. Tech is a relationship business too.
Yeah. And I mean, we experienced it a little bit. We're coming off the heels of Producers in Paradise roughly 3-4 weeks ago at this point. And, one of the sponsors that were there was Blue Pond AI, who's doing some really cool stuff with policy check-in, quote comparison. Having them there with a couple of our wholesale partners was huge, because my point was, you guys should be doing this on behalf of your agents. This is a great tool. If you're a wholesaler and you have all of these different markets that are coming back and offering quote, why wouldn't you want to have a tool like Blue Pond that will scan all of them in and then put it into a nice, neat spreadsheet with a bow on it that shows you, here's the differences in everything, like right down from sublimits and coverage lines, and then shows you who has what. And it makes it very easy, because I'm visual, man. You can, you and I can talk and have a 30-minute phone conversation. But when you show me something, bright colors, big picture, big dumb animal. But when you show me something in a spreadsheet like that, it makes it very easy for me to make a decision. And, you're not going to get, in my opinion, if you go to a normal trade show, like what we're used to seeing, where, hey, come hit a hole in one to win a free stress ball or something like, whatever. I want the sponsors of my event, along with the attendees, to just mingle and be people and build the relationship at the personal level first. Business will always follow after that. So it's cool because people come down, they have their guard down, and it's never a situation where, people are feeling sold to or hammered about doing demos or whatever else. We just get to be friends first. And, I think that's one of the best things. But one of the biggest pieces that I got out of this year's Producers in Paradise were some of the vendors that are now going to be able to work with each other, because they had that time, right? They had the time to have normal conversations and really listen, because as well as I do that if you're standing at a booth and somebody comes and talks to you, what's the real quality of that conversation? You're fighting for being able to be heard over the noise. You're fighting for their attention because there's bright lights and everything else for them to look left and right and see. And your message is probably not hitting at the level that you want it to. But when you have the conversations over dinner or at the pool or over drinks while you're listening to live music and you're just getting to know each other, and then that always transfers to, well, a big part of what we do is our business. And then you start talking about it, you actually hear the message better. You understand, oh, wow, wait a minute. I didn't realize that's what you guys did. That would actually work with this, this, and this. And you should also talk to, and that's really the cool part for me as the person who puts that event on to see is how people connect, number one, the relationships they form. And that's not limited to just the people that are in my online community. It's how do the sponsors form the relationships with the community, and how do the sponsors form the relationships with each other? And that event has just a very unique culture of its own because of that. And I don't think that a lot of events want that to happen. You know, they take the vendors, they isolate you in a ballroom, and you get access to the agents that are willing to come through those doors for 45 minutes or an hour in a break. Most of the time, you're just beholden to standing at a booth unless you're able to make relationships and have conversations after hours. But there's only so many hours after hours.
Yeah. I love Producers in Paradise. It is the model I think we should be moving towards to our events. You were in Phoenix for the Better conference,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, you were there.
all of them.
Nick Ayers and Brandon and I, we were all just kind of talking afterwards, and I said, I think, and I still think, like as a unique one, I've been to every conference in the circuit.
I've spoken so many different big eyes. Nothing looks like what FAIA looks like. It's just massive, more than anything else.
It feels like Applied Net. I'll be like, we were there, and this is the third time I've been to it with different companies. I think Producers in Paradise is my dream as a vendor for an event. I want to put on, I think this would be a really cool idea. I don't know who can pull it off, but I want to put on fly-ins on a beach. Gulf Shore, well, even Anna Maria Island, Florida has all these different beaches with all these mansions that you can rent Airbnb for a week for like 10 grand. Put 20 insurance agents in a beach house for a week. And it's, hey, let's learn about advertising. Let's learn about marketing. Let's learn about commercial insurance is a great thing. And then have 2 or 3 vendors who sponsor it, help offset the costs. They can come in, do their spiel, but also build relationships. And my idea a couple of years ago was to do a fly-in and just do like your marketing for 2026 is done. Your marketing, figure out your marketing campaign, figure out what ads, even shoot some ads and record some ads and get all that stuff done. I think that brings more value to the industry than the trade shows.
Agreed. No, I mean, listen, when I put it together, first off, it was an accident the first year, but then when it became intentional, it became intentionally different. And so I said, you know what, let's do this. Now, having it that geography is unique in and of itself, but then the next piece of it is, let's take it and we're only going to meet for 3 or 4 hours. The 2 days we meet from like 11 to 2 or 11 to 3, and that's it. Everything after that is you break up, you go out and you have your conversations. You hang with the people you want to hang with. You go to dinner, you listen to music, you drink beers, you go to the pool, whatever it is. It's the reverse. We flipped it upside down. You have less time in the formal setting and more time in the informal. And I think that's the part that makes it magical, because you're getting to know, you have the actual amount of time you need to get to know people. And I'm in sales, man. I understand you got to, if you're going to telemarket or whatever else, you got really quick to be able to try and get somebody to continue the conversation so you can hopefully gain trust. But in that environment, you can slow play everything, because that's kind of the speed of being in the island and everything else. And then the second thing that I think that we did right, if you're not going to get better year over year, what's the point of doing it? But the other thing that we did right is we made it experiential. Sponsors that are there to have conversations with independent agents and agency owners and producers, and you give them the experience of going offshore fishing in a center console boat with only 4 or 5 people on it, so that you have a very intimate setting of relationship building, right? And this year we did a dozen center console boats that we sent out. And that's not a cheap thing, man. I mean, I'm very thankful for the brands that put their name behind that event, because they're the ones who drive it. It's not me. They financially make that thing happen, and they do it in such a way they're doing it on faith, to be completely honest with you,
Yeah.
So you'll appreciate this because you've been at a couple different companies, you've been to several conferences, but you know what's going to happen, right? You have a booth, you know what you have to set up, you have an idea of what the traffic's going to look like. You may have the attendee list and know who you're going to target or whatever and everything else. And you pay your money, you go to that thing, and that's where it ends, right? You're responsible for follow-up and everything else. With Producers in Paradise, that's just the beginning. So what the brands get the benefit of is not just being there and mingling and having complete access to everybody, but it's the trail. It's going to be all the reels. It's going to be the blog posts. It's going to be the shout outs from individual agents who met somebody there and then ended up writing that first $1 million account with GenCap as a wholesaler that never would have known GenCap and Carrie Cheeks if they wouldn't have been at Producers in Paradise. And so I look at it a couple different ways. I mean, yeah, it's a great time. It's experiential. We get to do all kinds of fun stuff and we get to build really good relationships while we learn. But the amount of marketing juice that I can get for a brand just by getting all of the footage of their people wearing shorts, t-shirts, and flip-flops instead of coming in, with their presentation that they hand you or their hot list of what's being written or whatever else, where it's just like, wow, I can't believe that. Like, you got people, you've never seen them with their hair out of place. And now all of a sudden they're in their pool and their hair's messed up. And it's like, wow, this guy's just like I am, or this lady's just like I am. And it's so different at the human level. And it was a crazy social experiment that I was willing to try, and it's worked.
Yeah. I did pre-COVID. I was working with some friends. They all hated the B&I scene. In Des Moines, we have, for the Midwest, one of the more breweries per capita than pretty much anywhere else in the Midwest. And so why aren't we doing a brewery tour on Tuesday nights once a month? Meet and just invite everybody you talk to at BNI. The one rule is you're not allowed to talk about your business. So we started up what we call Brewing Up Business. And it wasn't just one real estate agent. It was every real estate agent everybody knew, every mortgage broker everybody knew, every insurance agent everybody knew, the tech nerds like me were there, all those things. And when COVID hit, everybody freaked out because all of their leads were coming from the people they met at Brewing Up Business. And they weren't having those conversations anymore, so they lost their mind. So we were like, oh, we had to spin something up real quick. But that was an eye-opener for me as a marketer and a salesperson. I was like, yeah, we don't have to talk about business to do business. We can build relationships and learn what people are all about. I have a really good friend of mine. I had no idea he takes the entire summer off to go fishing with his kids. I would have never learned that from his social media or at a BNI event. But now I know this guy loves fishing. So when I need, we had that conversation. I'm a terrible fisherman, but I love fishing. So we had that, built that connection that way. And that's something I think a lot of, yes, going to trade shows, there's an expected ROI. And it kills me because I'm like, the ROI is going to happen.
Right. So, I mean, I have this conversation, and when I have a new sponsor come in, they don't understand. They're operating at some level on faith that I'm going to deliver for them based on what I represent to them. And it's fun for me because they do get it once they get there, so even Nick Ayers, we're friends and he knows that I've done this, but he's never been part of it, never seen it. And Glovebox actually was a sponsor this year. And he came down along with Sean Mulhern and Danny, one of their sales guys. And he's like, David, he goes, I get it. They don't get it yet. But he said, by the end of the week, they get it. And that's the thing, man. I would argue, even though I have no way to quantify it, but I pay attention, I have the feedback from my community, I guarantee you that the people that invest in coming to that event get far more ROI and far more conversions than any other event that they go to, not just because of the format of the event, but because of all the exposure they get running up to it and everything they get as a trail up into and leading into the one next year. So, it's tough because we're in a world, especially now with all the analytics and data that we can get on marketing and everything else. I can't give it to you guys. I can just I can tell you right now that GenCap is getting a $1 million plus premium account from somebody that's in my community that they never would have gotten if they weren't at Producers in Paradise. And they have been one of our best sponsors. And they would agree with that, right? But that's just one of several. And when you start looking at the aggregation of it, it's easy to get lost in. Everybody else is giving us these metrics that we have to go by. But just look at the dollars and then trace it back to where it was. The problem is, it's not that we don't it's yes, that we don't have the metrics, but they don't have attribution on their end. If they had the ability to take attribution, put it into the CRM and tie it back, they could very easily run a report and say, oh, this agency's in Killing Commercial. They were at Producers in Paradise. That's where we ended up. Okay, now that makes sense. They're not doing it on their end. There's no way.
Now, a lot of people don't talk about it anymore, especially in our space, but one of my favorite people in marketing is Gary Vee. And my favorite line from Gary Vee is, what's the ROI of your mother? And I tell that, I send that to people all the time because they'll see, like, what's the ROI of it? I'm like, you can't put an ROI on relationships. You can't. You don't know. It's almost impossible to say, I'm like, what's the ROI of your mother? You can't put a number on that. Same thing with events. And I begged. I was like, we need to figure out how we can support Producers of Paradise so I can go.
Absolutely. It would be good, man. I mean, that's the other thing too. It started to morph a little bit because even though commercials about commercial insurance and middle market and all of that, these are well-rounded agencies, right? They're the targeted class they're a great prospect for really just about anybody that's looking to break into an insurance agency. The demographics, 750 to 1.5 million in revenue when they come in. Heavy personal lines and small commercial, maybe not a lot on middle market. And so they want to go there. And that's what they're coming to me for, is to help them add that into the mix. But these agencies are really, really healthy. And we've got people that have been captive, that have sold their captive agency and they want to go all in and learn the middle market stuff. And they come into the community pre-revenue, which I think is nuts. And a lot of pressure on me to make sure that they get revenue in by following what I say. But then we've got agencies that are 30, 40, 50 million in revenue that are in there too. So that's the other part of the mad scientist social experiment, is the community self-sustainable. I don't have to be the only person they learn from. We all learn, including me, from each other. My agency's not 50 million in revenue. I can promise you that. So what can I draw from that person? How can I become better at what I do? And the other thing is being humble enough to share and also know that you have things you can learn. And if you come in with that attitude, we're going to do a thing here with like the people that were at the original one and just look at what were my numbers 5 years ago and what are my numbers today and how have I grown and how can I tie that back to what we've done? And it may be a series of podcasts. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do it. And it wasn't even my idea. It was Dawn Bartley's idea up in Minnesota. She said, this would be really cool to do. And I think she's got a great idea, man. I didn't build the community and I didn't build the event for myself or my own glory. A lot of people say that and they're saying it just because it's the right thing to say. But if you talk to the people who are in the inner circle, they will tell you this is a very tribal environment. Okay. We are going to operate like a tribe. We are nasty together when we want to be nasty and go after business. But as we build things, if we look for opportunities and all of that, we do that together too. And it's really been very honoring and humbling for me to know that, an idea that I had that was kind of an accident and my big mouth started on my Facebook page has turned into something that's really been that cool. And in their own words, the event that they look forward to every single year. But the whole thing happened because we were going to Key West with another couple. We always go the same weekend every year and they bailed on us and I had a fishing charter booked. So I just put it out on Facebook. Hey, I got an extra spot on my charter. I could get up to 6 people on there. If anybody wants to come to Key West for the weekend and hang with us, you can be my guest on my fishing charter. I'm not asking you to pay anything. You would have to pay for your flight, your stuff, but I'll let you go fishing with us. And I'll talk enough about business that we can make it a write-off for you. Well, I had a problem because I went from needing 1 boat to having 4 boats. And I paid for it out of my own pocket. I didn't have sponsors or anything, but I told the people if they wanted to come, that I'd take them fishing on my nickel, and I honor my word. That's the one thing I can control in my life. And so I bought 4 boats that year. And then the next year, as we were ramping up, I'm like, all right, time to go out and get some sponsors. We need help with this because I'm not bankrolling this thing. And we doubled. And then the next year we doubled. And then this year we almost doubled, but it was probably more like a 60 or 70%. And then we had issues because I don't know what's going on with the airlines and the weather. It's not the FAA crap that we all see on the news. People had flight delays. I had it happen to me last night. I was on the tarmac in Atlanta for like 30, 40 minutes and was really late getting home because they couldn't let us leave because the ground crew couldn't go out and load the luggage due to the lightning. And we ended up having about 40 people not able to come to Producers in Paradise because their flights were rescheduled to where they wouldn't be able to get in till after the event or completely canceled. And that's one of the biggest downsides to having it there, is because it's not easy to get in and out of. You have a flight cancellation, you're toast, but it will never move. And it will always be at the same weekend. The reason why is because that's when at 42 years old, I started over with nothing. I started over that weekend in Key West, Florida. There's a picture 9 years ago of me and my wife standing next to the mile marker 0 sign where I talk about this is where it all starts over. You know, at 42, I have nothing. I'm starting an agency from scratch. I don't have any employees. I don't have any carriers. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to succeed.
Yep, that's awesome, man. Well, David, I appreciate you booking a call. If anybody wants to learn more or connect with you, what's the best way they can?
I would say, I tell people this when I do my public speaking, I'm a social swinger. Okay. I'm going to connect with everybody everywhere. You just tell me where you want to be. The only thing you need to understand is there's no filter. So, you know, if you want to be part of the crazy personal stuff on Facebook, by all means, you know, send me a friend request and I'll happily connect with you and you can see just how nuts we really are. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. I'm on literally every platform. So I would say the best way to connect is probably, you know, from a professional standpoint on LinkedIn, from a personal standpoint, Facebook. As long as I can see that you're an agent and not somebody trying to sell me aged leads, I connect with pretty much everybody.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.